Okay, good morning. Sunday, October 18th. All my videos start with me staring at my phone. Bless my heart. Sunday, October 18th. We're in the book of Genesis. This is my Sunday school lesson. It's so interesting to me, to no one else, but to me, what's going on in Genesis here with Abraham. This is a section that people don't talk a lot about. Here we're in Genesis chapter 14. Abraham's just come back from Egypt. Well, okay, so to review, God said, go to a place I'm going to show you. Just start walking. And that's how God is sometimes. I'm just going to give you the first part, and you got to do it. Do the first part. And then if you do the first part, he gives you step two. And if you do step two, he gives you step three. And if you're waiting for step four, like, how come I haven't gotten step four? Because you have to do step three. And God will just sit and God will wait you out because he's been here a while. So he's not in a hurry, but he's not going to let us skip ahead. There's no parts we get to skip. So he tells Abraham, just start walking. So Abraham had to start walking. We got to Canaan land, which belonged to the Canaanites. God said, this is the land I'm going to give you. And as soon as he said that, then he sent a famine. That's interesting. And it wasn't a famine from the devil, it was from God. And because God tells us something, but he's not going to necessarily bring it to pass instantly. There are things that need to happen first that we don't know about, that we don't understand. But the famine drove Abraham to Egypt, where he thought, they're going to kill me because my wife's really pretty and they're going to want my wife, so they're going to kill me. So just say you're my sister, and if they take you, fine, but at least I'll be alive because I've got to fulfill God's promise. But God said, no. By the way, Sarah's the person who I'm going to fulfill the promise through, so that's not going to happen. And he began to plague the Pharaoh in Egypt. And that's when the Pharaoh in Egypt, who had some sensitivity toward God in some way, said, okay, there's got to be some sort of problem here why all this stuff is happening. We're quick to say it's the devil. But it's the devil does not bring circumstances. Anyway, we've already had this discussion. So he goes to Abraham. Why didn't you tell me this was your wife? I thought it was your sister. Now, Pharaoh finds out it's his wife. He doesn't kill him. That's what the very thing that Abraham thought would happen did not happen. He said, once they find out you're my wife, they're going to kill me. That's not what happened. Found out his wife, and in fact, blessed him and sent him on his way. So he's back in Canaan land, which ultimately was called Palestine, which was called Israel. So he's back in the land that God said he was going to give him. And here's his next adventure. So he divides up the land because now he's got a bunch of stuff. He's got 318 servants that he brought from his father's household. He's got his nephew Lot, and Lot's got a bunch of, it's too many people, not enough land because they got cows and sheep and things, and so there's not enough grass here. We can't stay together. Like, God has blessed us too much. We got to split up. So he gives Lot the choice. You choose, because Abraham has learned, wow, God's got my back. He's going to provide for me, so I don't have to be selfish. I don't have to look out for my own thing, and I don't have to be worried. I can just trust that God will provide. So Lot, you pick. So of course Lot picked the really good ground down in the valley, right next to Sodom and Gomorrah. That made all the sense in the world to him. This looks fantastic, but your eyes can deceive you. So that's why you got to listen to your heart, and sometimes you have to take the car that doesn't look as good, because that big expensive one or something, you have no idea the thousands of dollars it's going to cost you in repairs. You should have taken the other car, but that one looked pretty and shiny. And so sometimes we do that, we take the pretty shiny object instead of what God's telling us to do. So Lot took the pretty shiny object, which was the land right in between Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham stayed up on the hill. So God speaks to him and says, this is yours. Everything. In fact, be bold. So Abraham, for the first time, starts to walk the land. He makes friends with Mamre and his brother Eshcol and his brother, I'm going to say Arnie. Well, anyway, something like that. It could be Arnie. It's something like that. So he makes friends with him and his three brothers, and that's where we are. Okay, So Genesis, now we're in Genesis, that was all Genesis chapter 13. All of that, the entire Bible was all in Genesis chapter 13. Now we're in Genesis chapter 14, verse 1. And it came to pass, oh, let me just tell you this story and then we'll read it. It'd be easier if I tell it to you first and then we read it. So there were four kings from the Mesopotamian area, led by Chedorlaomer. I'm going to say that's his name, Chedorlaomer. And they're from the Mesopotamian area, not Canaan, but east of there. And these four kings came and they raided. This had happened years ago, before Abraham got there. They raided the land, and what they do is they stand outside your kingdom, and kind of like our image of the Trojan horse, where the Greeks were on the outside, and or the Trojans were on the outside, and the Greeks were, well, anyway, one group was on the outside, one was on the inside, and like, we're gonna come in and attack you unless you give us what we want. And with the Trojans and the Trojan horse, they wanted the wife back. They'd stolen the wife. So in this case, they stand outside the kingdom and basically say, we're going to attack you unless you give us what we want. And what they wanted was them to send them a tribute each year. Send us money every year. So they had attacked, these four kings had attacked these five kingdoms, and had talked them into giving them a tribute. So once a year, like let's say December 31st, the money would show up. This happened for 12 years in a row. They never saw those kings again. The kings showed up, threatened them, and then left. And about the end of the 12th year, they thought, why are we sending money to these people? We've been sending money to these people for 12 years. We haven't heard from them since. Let's not send them money. Because who knows what's going on way over there in Mesopotamia. This is kind of the area that Abraham, his family had moved to originally. And then they came up. You couldn't cross the Sahara. You had to always go up to Syria and then back the other side to Israel. So that those people, they could all be dead. We don't know what kind of war is going on over there. We're just sending them money every year. Let's not send them money, see what happens. So year 13, they didn't send them any money. December 31st came, and the kings, those four kings from Mesopotamia area said, there ain't no money. Let's go get them. So year 14, they come back, right? And they not only going after the five kings. One was the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah. There's five kings. So, but they just kind of attack a whole bunch of places on their way to them. And so the kings of those five kings hear that the four kings are coming, and they meet them in the valley of Sidon, and there's a big fight, and the five kings lose because the four kings, they're tough, led by Chedorlaomer. I'm keep saying his name differently because it's Lao, and I don't know if that's Lo or Lao. So so Chedorlaomer wins basically, and this time he really attacks them because the first time he just stood outside the city and said, "Give us your money," but this time he goes in and he pillages them and he takes their money and people and takes slaves, including Abraham's nephew Lot. Takes him. Okay, so now we're going to read through it. Okay, and I'm going to stop you, but I just want to. That's basically the story, and then we'll catch up. Okay, so Genesis chapter 14, verse 1, and it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, the king of Shinar. Now, I just want to tell you who he is. Shinar is the first place that Nimrod turned into when Nimrod had four cities. Nimrod, Noah's grandson, right? In 10, it says, "And the beginning of his kingdom," talking about Nimrod, Genesis 10:10. "The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar." I'm calling it Shinar or Shinar. Okay, so that's where Nimrod established. That is modern day Iran today. Iraq. That's the area where Babylon eventually grew, and that's modern day Iraq. So that's the area that they're coming from. They're coming from that Iraq. So they're saying in the days of Amraphel, who's the king of Shinar, which is that modern day Iraq area, what happened? Still in verse 1, Arioch, the king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam. He's the king of cheese. And he's king of Elam. Now he's Elam is modern day Iran. Persia in Genesis 10:22, and we read this, but why would you remember it? It says the sons of Shem. So you got the sons of Ham who are in Iraq. Some of the sons of Shem are in what's today modern day Iran. It says the sons of Shem were Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. Okay, and Arphaxad is where Abraham's folks come from. But Elam was his oldest son, and they founded Iran. So you got the king of two kings from Iraq, basically two kings from the Iran area. They show up. Okay, and then the fourth king. I'm sorry, and title the king of nations. That means the king of Goyim, the king of the Gentiles. The third son, Japheth, his people were the Goyim, the Gentiles. So they had not yet crossed over into Europe. Remember the three sons, their people went all, you can trace them all over the world to where they ended up. Japheth, he was the youngest son, and they were slow. And so they're still hanging out. They hadn't crossed the Caucasus Mountain, I'm about to say the Caucasian Mountains, the Caucasus Mountains, and gone over into Europe. So they're still hanging out, trying to just following people around like the little brother would do, trying to figure out who they're going to be. Okay, so they're the king of nations. He comes the king of the Gentiles, the king of the Goyim, those people who eventually went. And again, Moses is telling this hundreds of years later. So everybody knows what he's talking about. Oh, yeah, the Gentiles. Yeah, I remember them. So those four kings, they show up in Genesis chapter 14, verse 2, and they made war with these five kings. Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemimber, help me, Jesus, Shemeber, king of Zebulun, and the king of Bela, which is now called Zor, he's telling them. And all these joined together in the valley of Sodom, and 12, okay, so they're describing the battle that happened once they came back. And now he's saying 12 years in verse 4, they had served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year, they rebelled. That's when, remember, 12 years in a row, they're paying them money. In the 13th year, it's like, no, we're not going to send them any more money. So now in the 14th year, verse 5, Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him came and attacked. Now here they go and they attack a bunch of other places on their way down to meet Sodom and Gomorrah, the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, those five kings. They attacked Rephaim and Ashtaroth, the Zuzim and Ham, the Emin and Cheveth. It's all a bunch of names, okay? And the Horites in the mountain Seir. These are where the Hors come. No, I'm kidding. As far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness. Then see, people are clicking off. What happened? Then they turned back and came to En Mishpat. So they went down one side, and now they're coming back up the other side, and they're eventually going to meet these five kings that are waiting for them. Back and attack the country of the Amalekites and also the Amorites that dwelled in Hazazon Tamar. Okay, so Moses just explaining all these places that these people who are hearing the story, they know all these places. Wow, they came in at. So they came back with a vengeance because they were mad because they've been getting their money for 12 years in a row, and then 13th year no money came. That's why 13 is unlucky, I guess.
Mitch better have my money.
Yeah. So they're coming back and they're attacking everybody on the way. So finally, the five kings are going to meet the four kings. Now, the four kings are the ones from Mesopotamia, Iran, Iraq. Okay, they're going to meet them. So Genesis chapter 14, verse 8. And the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zebulun, and the king of Bela, which is in Zor, went out together and joined together in battle in the valley of Sodom. So that's where they're all meeting together, the five kings versus the four. Against Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, titled king of nations, the Goyim, Amraphel, king of Shinar, which is where Iraq is, Arioch, king of Elasar, four kings against five. Okay, now, verse 10. Now, the valley of Sodom was full of asphalt pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, they fled because they said, this is a stupid place. Why did we meet them here? Because they're full of tar. And so they got out of there. But some fell there, actually fell into the pits, and the remainder fled to the mountains. So they're getting their butts kicked. And so, because they picked the wrong place to meet them. And this is their home turf. You'd think they would know better, but they weren't good at fighting. Then they took all the goods. So The four kings, they won. Everybody fled, so their cities are left unprotected because all the warriors and the kings and stuff they're all hiding in the mountains. So they just went on into those cities that owed them all this money. Verse 11 says, Then they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions, and they went their way. They also took Lot, Abram's brother, son who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. So they took some slaves with them. Lot had said to himself, This is a great place to live. I think I'll live here between Sodom and Gomorrah because it's got better ground, because I don't trust that God's going to provide. So let me just take the. And so he ends up getting kidnapped, taken off into slavery. So Genesis chapter 14, verse 13. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew. That's a whole long story why Abram the Hebrew and how Moses is this story. It doesn't matter. Okay, but that's what they called Abram in this land. Abram the Heber, because he came from Eber. That's his grandfather, right? That's his descendant, and they basically called him the Hebrew. For he dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, the Amorite. So remember, he met Mamre. Mamre owed those terebinth trees, and Abraham had settled next to Mamre, made friends with these three brothers, and the brother of Eshcol. Just want to tell you a little bit about Eshcol, his brother, because this was a nice area where Abraham settled. He was up on the mountain, but then when God said to him, all of this is yours, just start walking, make friends, meet people, he went and he met Mamre and stayed there. And Mamre had nice trees, figs, pomegranates, all this stuff. Really beautiful area where he was. Okay, Eshcol, his brother. Now, 600 years from now, not from now, but from this time that the story is being taking place, the children of Israel come back from Egypt, led by Moses, and they're about to go into the promised land, into the Canaanite land, right? And Moses sends out spies. So where do they go? They go to Mamre's house, to Eshcol's house. In Numbers chapter 13, verse 23, it says, Then they came to the valley of Eshcol, and there cut down a branch with one cluster of grapes, and they carried it between the two of them on a pole. They also brought some of the pomegranates and figs. So this is the trees of Mamre and his brother Eshcol. They went to his valley. Two of them went and remembered that story and how Mamre had blessed him. And the two of the spies went there and brought back the grapes and the pomegranates and the figs. Remember, they said, This is great. This is fantastic. We need to go in. But the other spies, they had gone a different direction. They had gone near where the Philistines were and Goliath and all his relatives. And they said, No, they're giants. So we don't believe God. We're not going to do what God said to do. That always works. That's always a good plan. Let me not do what God said. So anyway, so that's Eshcol. That's one brother. And then the brother of Aner. Who did I say? Arnie? Bless my heart. Okay, so here's who he is, this third brother, Arnie. No, okay, Aner. In 1 Chronicles 6, chapter 70. Oh, you know what? I forgot to look up what that was. But he also there was another time when they dealt with his folks and they were blessed. So I won't go into it because I didn't write down what the verse was. But there was blessings from Mamre and Eshcol and his brother Aner. And whenever people went in that area, just know that they were blessed. Okay. So it says they were allies with Abraham. They were friends with Abraham. And Abraham's staying with him. And the guy shows up and says, Guess what happened to Lot? Okay. So verse 14. Now when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his 318 trained servants who were born in his own house. So again, he's got no kids, but his father had servants that were passed down to him, and they got like an army of servants. Because once you had a really good job, you just kept it. Apparently, they were not his slaves; they were just his servants born in his house, and his servants had kids, and their servants had kids. So he's got 318 servants, which is one reason why he needed a lot of grass to graze on, because he had a lot of people to feed and take care of, which is amazing. Because we just picture Abraham all by himself. Well, I'll just go wherever God leads me. But when you got 318 mouths you got to feed, you got to really trust that God knows what he's doing. Okay? So, it says, so he took his 320 servants. He also I just want to tell you that he also takes with him uh, Eshkol's people and Mamre's people and Aner's people. They all go with Abraham to this fight. Now, this is what's fantastic is Abraham's not a fighter up until this point. He's not. That's not what he did. In fact, he was scared that the Pharaoh was going to get him. And these kings had conquered all of Canaan. I mean, the four kings from Mesopotamia came over, but he's like, I'm getting my nephew back, and he just went because there's some kind of boldness that he got from God when God spoke to him and said, I've given you this land, start walking on it. And so there's some side of confidence he had. And when you really have a strong relationship with God, there's a confidence that you can start to get, that you know how to tap into that. Where no, where if God's on your side, you can go for it. You just know it's going to work. So he goes. Now, it says he went in pursuit as far as Dan. I just have to stop here. I'm going to try to take an 8-minute excursion because I must talk about Dan. So you're in Israel, and Dan is up in the north. So he's going north because when the four kings came, you remember you have to go back up north to Syria and then across and then back down. You don't want to go across the Arabian desert. So everybody had to go up north, across, and then back down into Mesopotamia. So he's going up north, and Dan is the farthest north tribe that's right next to Syria. Okay, that is not originally where Dan was supposed to have been. So here's the story of Dan. Because Dan fascinates me. He just fascinates me. So when Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Okay, when Jacob was old, he prophesied over his 12 kids and basically said, here's what's going to happen to each of your generations, your progeny, the people who follow after you. Okay, here's basically what, and mostly everybody got good prophecies. You're going to lead your people, you're going to do that. So he says to Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. There's going to be a period of judges, and there's going to be a descendant of Dan who will be one of the judges who will judge people. Well, Dan's descendant was Samson. Samson was a judge. Samson made poor choices constantly. But I just want to, his birth being foretold is just interesting to me. In Judges chapter 13, verse 2 through 3, it says, now there was a certain man from Zorah of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had no children, and the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman. Now, normally in how they write it, it appeared to the man, like the angel of the Lord appeared to Abraham and said, you're going to have a child. And the angel of the Lord appeared to Jacob and said, you're going to have, right? But in this case, he appeared to the wife and not to the husband and told her, you're going to have a child. And so she went and told her husband. Her husband said, what? Well, maybe the angel of the Lord would come and tell me that. So he prayed, and the angel of the Lord came back and appeared to the wife and told her the rest of it. And then the man came up to the angel and said, well, tell me. And he says, I've told the wife everything I'm going to tell you. Ask her. And it's interesting that sometimes God will tell one person one thing and not the other person, and you got to trust them. There are times that God gives the pastor the vision, like God told Moses, I want you to go. He didn't appear to the other 12 spies who had an opinion representing one of each tribe. He didn't appear to them. He appeared to Moses and said, here's the plan. So they were like, I'm not feeling that. But there's a reason they weren't feeling that, because God didn't tell them. He told Moses. So there's a point where sometimes you have to trust the person, even though you aren't feeling it, even though that's not what God is saying to you. It doesn't mean that that's not what God's saying to that other person. And the angel of the Lord's like, I need you to trust your wife, what God is saying to her. Even though that's not you. God sometimes says something to the other partner, and you have to trust them. It's like, I'm not getting that. The other person, well, I'm getting that. So, okay, I'm going to trust that you're hearing that, and you need to go with it. And it goes both ways, but you sometimes have to trust. So he purposely said, ask your wife. I told her. So you have to ask her. And basically said, you're going to have a son, his name is Samson. So they're the tribe of Danites. And so Samson, sure enough, was a judge. So that part came true. He says, from the tribe of Dan, you're going to be one of the judges. Even though Samson made horrible decisions, was terrible at picking out women, married Delilah, had married someone right before that. He was terrible at it. He was still anointed. So people have a certain anointing. Doesn't mean they have anointing in every area. And sometimes we think that somebody could be like, I like to teach, but that doesn't mean I'm good at fixing cars. Just because someone has anointing in one area doesn't mean they have anointing in every area. You got to know what you're good at. And Samson was good at judging. He was terrible at picking wives. He should have listened to people. Anyway, okay, so that's the tribe of Dan as far as that go. But here's the rest of what Jacob said to Dan. Dan shall be a serpent, by the way. This is in Genesis 49. This is now verse 17. Dan's going to be a serpent, by the way, in the path, that means. A viper by the path. He's going to be a viper, like an adder, and that's a specific type of snake. Those are the ones that hide and bury themselves in the sand, and then they jump out and grab the bird, stuff like this. So it's like he's going to be tricky and deceitful, and nobody else was called a serpent. He said, so he's going to be a serpent that bites the horse's heels, so that the rider falls backwards. He says, like, this is not good what Dan is going to do. He says, I have waited for your salvation, O Lord. He kind of says, oh, I'm just waiting for your salvation, because he can feel what's going to happen to Dan, and that man needs salvation. I've waited for it, he's saying. Okay, then Moses, so this is before they spend those 400 years in Egypt, where he's saying, here's what's going to happen to Dan's people. 400 years later, when they're coming out of Egypt, Moses prophesies to all of them, and he prophesies to Dan. And in Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 22, Deuteronomy 33, 22, and it says, of Dan, he said, Dan is a lion's whelp. Now, he had just prophesied to the one right before him, Gad, I think, and said, you're a lion, and you're going to do this and this and that. But he says, you're like a crazy lion. A lion's whelp is an energetic, unpredictable lion who says, Drah! Right? And he shall leap from Bashan. Now, it's not good to leap from Bashan. Here's what they said about, so he's going to leap from Bashan and come out of Bashan. That's going to be his reference points. When he leaps out on you like that, those crazy lions whelp, a long, energetic, crazy lion, he's going to leap from Bashan. Here's what happened in Psalm 22 when David has a vision about the Messiah on the cross. He actually sees what Jesus is saying when he's on the cross. He feels it. He experiences what the Messiah is going through. And that's the one that starts, oh God, why have you forsaken me? Because he sees himself on a cross. Like David is kind of seeing through the Messiah's eyes and thinking, look at what's happening. And I'm bleeding and pain. And in his mind, he's been forsaken. Now, later on in Psalm 22, he says, oh, you have not abandoned me. You have helped me. He realizes that God hasn't done that. But that's his initial impression when he sees what's going on. But God didn't abandon Jesus on the cross. People have come up with all sort of theories why David says, oh God, why have you forsaken me? But God hadn't forsaken Jesus. Jesus was doing exactly what he told him to do. Anyway, so, and if you just read the whole thing, because we never read the whole thing, you'll see that David realizes that God hadn't abandoned him. But here's one thing that he does say in Psalm 22, verse 12. He said, many bulls have surrounded me. So again, he's seeing through the Messiah's eyes, and these people are surrounding him who were yelling at him, screaming at him, who they're his enemies. He says, they are the strong bulls of Bashan. They've encircled me. So it's like the people from that area of Bashan, they're the ones who are my enemies at this point. They gape me with their mouths like a raging and roaring lion. It's that same kind of energetic. They are screaming at me like a lion, and they're from Bashan. So when he says he's going to leap from Bashan, he's like, you're leaping from the enemy's camp, Dan. That's why. So it's not good. So here's what happened to Dan. So when they cross over the Jordan, they've left Egypt, and they finally decide to go into the promised land and do what God said to do. And God again will just wait you out. I'm not gonna bless you. I'm gonna make you wander around in circles until you do what I tell you to do, and then you can move forward. So they finally had repented. They cross over the Jordan, and Joshua is telling everybody where to go. Dan was supposed to have gone right in between Judah and Benjamin. Judah and Benjamin, that's the safe place. Because when there's 12 tribes, and Judah and Benjamin are in the south, Simeon's over here a little bit to the right. But Judah and Benjamin, the other 12 tribes, the other 10 tribes of the 12 eventually were let off the captivity and messed up. And Judah stayed faithful. Uh, and Benjamin, and had Dan stayed there and done what he's supposed to do, he might have been protected. And what Joshua told them to do was go out and conquer the land. What God told them to do, go out and conquer the land. Don't look at the enemy. I've given you that hill. I've given you that situation. Stop looking at the enemy and weighing whether or not you're going to win by who the enemy is. So Joshua just went ahead and he won his battle. And then a few other tribes said, help me. And Joshua, I'm sorry, Judah won his battle. And Judah helped like 3 or 4 of his other brothers' tribes win their battles. But there are several tribes that didn't even try. They looked at the enemy and they gave up. And we defeat ourselves when we don't even try. When God puts something in our hearts and we say, "Oh no, that'll never work. That's not going to happen," because we're looking too much at the enemy and how strong they are. We're not looking at how powerful God is. So Dan didn't even try to do what he was supposed to do. So he started to go out against the Amorites, and in Judges chapter 1, verse 34, it says the Amorites forced the children of Dan into the mountains, for they did not want to allow them to come down to the valley. But Dan didn't even try. Like, he's supposed to go down into the valley, and they said, get up, and they said, okay, and they just went up in the mountains. They didn't even try. So Dan's just living up in the mountains. They're not living where they're supposed to be, where they've been assigned. So let's skip ahead to Joshua chapter 18, verse 1. It says, in those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for itself to dwell in, for until that day their inheritance among the tribes of Israel had not fallen to them. Meaning they still hadn't taken it. It's been a couple generations now. There's been another generation has gone by, and they still haven't done what they're supposed to do. So they finally decided to send out 5 spies and see if you can find a place for us up north, because maybe somewhere up north we can go up near Syria. And so in verse 7 it says, so the 5 men departed and went to Laish, and they saw the people who dwelt there and how they dwelt safely in the manner of the Sidonians. They were quiet and secure. They see these people just living, minding their own business. It's the only place in Canaan where there were sweet people who were, as opposed to the Philistines, who, if Dan had conquered the Philistines, then Goliath wouldn't have been a problem all that time later. But up north, there's these sweet people. It says they dwelt quietly and secure. There were no rulers in the land who might put them to shame for anything. There was nobody ruling over them and being me. They were far from the Sidonians, and they had no ties with anyone. They were just all by themselves. They weren't connected with the Sidonians. They weren't connected. Just a sweet little people. So, of course, they decided to go up and kill all of them.
Makes sense.
Yes. So, in Joshua chapter 18, verse 18, but they said, before we go, let's get a priest and who go with us and bless everything that we're going to do. And people will do that, right? You've made up your own plan. It's not God's plan. Pastor, I need you to pray for me. I'm about to go to Vegas and put $20 on a horse or whatever. God did not tell you to do that. God told you to take that money and put it in church. But you've got a plan. I'm on my way to the racetrack, and I want you to pray that God just really blesses me. Oh, that's fine. He can pray all he wants, but God's not going to bless your plan. He's only going to bless his plans. So, but they said, let's get a priest. And so they went to Micah's house. Now, Micah was not a descendant of the children of Israel and all that stuff like that. He was somebody who just lived in Canaan, but he had hired a priest to come and to bless him and all his idols. And in verse 18, it says, they went into Micah's house and they took the carved image, like an idol that he had blessed, and the ephod that the priest had brought with him, and the household idols, and the molded image. And the priest said to them, what are you doing? And so, because they went in and he had like a bunch of idols because he was an idolater. And the tribe of Dan said, let's take these with us. We'll take the priest. We'll take all these idols before we go fight those little sweet, calm people that are up there. And so in verse 30, in fact, they said to him, do you want to be the head of a priest at somebody's house, or do you want to be a priest for the whole nation of Dan and our tribe? And he said, yeah, I'll do that, because he was a priest for hire. And there's a whole story about he wasn't even supposed to be there and all that. But anyway, so in verse 30 it says, and the children of Dan set up for themselves the carved image. So once they went up and slaughtered and killed all those people, the women and children, they killed all those people. They set up themselves the carved image. And Jonathan, the son of Gershom, it says the son of Manasseh. Now, the earliest Latin version says the son of Moses. So it's Jonathan, who's Gershom's son, the son of Moses. But they changed it. They were so horrified when they translated it into English that Moses' grandson became such an idolater that there are versions that just change it to Manasseh, and they just changed it. But it's Moses' grandson. If you look in Exodus chapter 2, verse 21, it tells you who Moses' first son was, named Gershom, and Gershom's son was Jonathan. But they were just hideous. They were horrified. But look, just because your daddy's a preacher doesn't mean you have your life together. Your granddaddy could be a preacher, doesn't mean you have your life together. Moses' grandson was an idolater. We just have to deal with it. Okay. And his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land. So, and in fact, you can, when Ahab and Jeroboam erected their temple, in fact, in 1 Kings chapter 12, 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 30, it says, now this thing became a sin. So Jeroboam became the first really idolater king of the north. And when the north split from the south, when Rehoboam was in the south and Jeroboam was in the north, and they had their civil war and they split, Jeroboam said, I'm going to build my own temple and build my own idols and have people come here and worship up here. We don't have to go all the way down to the north to worship. Let's just worship our own God. And people do that. Yeah, to the south. We don't have to go down to the south to worship. We'll worship here in the north. And they lured people away from the church. And that's the danger of getting away from the Bible, getting away from sound teaching, getting away from fellowship with other people. You can eventually just make up your own religion and not know. I don't need to go way down into the church. I'll just make my own thing up here. So they made up their own thing. And where did they go? It says this thing became a sin. Again, I'm in 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 30. For the people went to worship before the one as far as Dan, because Dan had built a temple to Baal, and he made shrines on the high places and made priests from every class of people who were not the sons of Levi. So if you're not a Levite, because that after when the law was established, the Levites were the priests. That was Moses' line and Aaron's line. God had said, under the law, I want these people to be the priests. He picked everybody else who was not a priest, and you be a priest, and you be a priest, and you be a priest. And there are too many people who are teaching the word, who they don't have the gift of doing that, but they're still teaching it anyway. Or they're preaching, and that's not their calling. They really are supposed to be a politician. They're really supposed to be something else. And that's why when you go to their church, all you hear is politics. Or you go to the church, all you hear is how you hear motivational speaking. And because that's their gift. They're not supposed to be in the pulpit. So you can tell someone who either understands the word of God or understands God, and that's their calling, and people who that's not really their calling. You can be charismatic and you can like speaking in front of people. That's not your calling. So he appointed everybody else a priest other than the people who were called to do it. Okay. And then, so tribe of Dan, the only reason I bring them up is because in the book of Revelation, when the 144,000 Jews are called and they are evangelizing, there's 12,000 people from every tribe. He mentions every single tribe except for Dan. And that's amazingly deep. Ephraim and Manasseh, they each get one. So Dan, he says there will not be anybody from Dan who will be there evangelizing in the last day. The whole tribe of Dan is going to be not included in this because they became such idolaters and such worshipers of Baal that when the Assyrians came and they took the tribe of Dan and brought them to Assyria and then released them, they left. They never came back to that area, which is Samaria right now. They never came back. They just went their way. They took their idols with them, and they are the leaders of idolatry. And so they never returned to Israel. So it's so interesting. The book of Revelation, the tribe of Dan is not even mentioned So they have an interesting history. So here's where Abraham goes first. He goes as far as Dan, which at the time was called Laish. It wasn't called Dan at that time. So that's where he stops. So now I'm back to Abraham. Oh my God, and I lied, and that was like 18 minutes. I said it would be 8. Okay, but the rest I can do easily. So he stops in Dan, and he gathers himself together. All of the time it was called Laish, because he wants to go find Lot. Oh yeah, that's the story we're talking about. Abraham's on his way to find Lot. Okay, but we are talking about just not doing what God told you to do. Like Dan didn't do what God told him to do. Lot didn't do. If you don't do, you can start on a path, and it turn out to be it's a serpent's path, and it just takes you off in some road in the wrong direction. And God will send you warning signs, and we need to turn back around because you can end up somewhere you don't want to be. Okay, so once he gets to Dan, he stops Abraham because he's trying because those 4 kings have kidnapped all those people, right? Those 4 kings from Iraq and Iran, and taken them up north. And then the warriors are on horses. They've gone on, but the people who are the servants and the slaves, they're not all on horses, so they're moving much slower. So he knows he can catch up with them, right? Because they didn't put everybody on horses. That was reserved for the kings and all those people. So it says he divided his forces in verse 14 of Genesis chapter 4. In verse 15 of Genesis chapter 14, it says he divided his forces against them by night. And he and his servants attacked them and pursued them as far as Hobah, which is north of Damascus. So now they're in the Syria area, Syria, Turkey, that area. They're in Damascus. Remember that Paul, who was Saul, saw Jesus on the road to Damascus, and God sent him back another way. Okay, so they go as far as Damascus, and that's when he's able to turn Lot around. So everybody has their Damascus experience where you're on your way to a bad place, like Saul was on his way to a bad place, but Jesus met him and knocked him off his horse. And so on Damascus, he's on the way there. Abraham is able to capture Lot and bring him back. So verse 16, so he brought back all the goods, also brought back his brother Lot and his goods, as well as the women and the people. So he's able to bring them back down into Canaan, which is eventually Israel, right? So verse 27, it says, and the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Sheva, which is the king's valley, after his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him. So first the king of Sodom goes back because he wants all his people back, right? That they came and kidnapped all my people and took all my stuff while I was hiding in the mountains. And so now Abraham's got it. Interesting, by the laws of piracy or something, once you, like, it's mine now, they took it from you and I took it from them, so it belongs to me. So he's going to go meet him and kind of see if he can make a deal with him to get his stuff, because technically, by the Constitution that all the pirates and the pillagers wrote up, what you keep, you kill. No, what you kill, you keep. Anyway, okay. So
Possession is 9/10.
possession is 9/10 of the law. Exactly. We even adopted that. You know, I stole your radio, so I possess it now. It's mine. All right. Genesis chapter 14, verse 18. It says, then Melchizedek. I blackify all these names. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, which means Salem means shalom, means peace, the king of peace. And Melchizedek, help me, Jesus. Melchizedek, name means king of righteousness. So the king of righteousness, the king of peace shows up. And he brings out the bread and the wine, and he was the priest of the most high God, El Elohim, the most high God. And he blessed Abraham and said, blessed be Abraham, God of the most high God, possessor of heaven and earth. And then and blessed be God most high, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. So he brought the blessing to him and said, look what God has done. Let's celebrate with the bread and the wine, which obviously is foreshadowing of the body and the blood. And so the king of righteousness shows up. The king of peace shows up. This priest shows up, and he gave him, and Abraham's response to being blessed in this way was to give him tithes of everything that he had. That's the natural response. This is before the law. This is before Moses made everybody do it. The natural response when God blesses you is to tithe and give back because it all belongs to God. So despite the law of piracy or where it's all mine, Abraham recognized it all really belongs to God. This is all God's. It's on loan to me right now. This life is on loan to me. This body is on loan to me. This house is on loan to me right now. This is God's. I'm just leasing it. This is all God's. And so as a show of his understanding, he gives him tithes of everything, even what he got in Egypt. Like, here, you can have everything. So now this Melchizedek is is talked about in Hebrews chapter 5, verse 10 and 11. He was called by God as a high priest, talking about Jesus, according to the order of Melchizedek, right? That Jesus was a high priest before the law was given, and God had designated that the Levites be high priests, that Melchizedek was already a priest. So worshiping, having an altar, all that stuff was established back in Cain and Abel. They were sacrificing to God. This idea of giving back to God, it's not a thing of the law. People say, well, I'm not under the law anymore. I don't have to tithe. Well, not under the law, but under the law of God, under our natural response to God. Giving back to God is just the natural thing. Okay, so called by priests according to the order of Melchizedek, of whom we have much to say and hard to explain since you become dull of hearing. So he said this whole Melchizedek thing is hard to say and hard to explain but he said, I'm going to try to explain it to you. So in Hebrews chapter 7, verse 1 through 3, it says, for this Melchizedek, okay, help me, king of Salem, who's the king of peace, king of shalom, king of wholeness. Shalom carries everything, health, healing, all of that. He's the king of that. And Melchizedek, which means king of righteousness. He says he's priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings, and he blessed him. To whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, first being translated king of righteousness, and then also king of Salem, meaning king of peace. Now he says he's without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God. He remains a priest continually. So because this guy just showing up, at the time we're supposed to think that Abraham's the only person who really knew God and understood God. And then this priest shows up who's a priest of God. And so, no, God always God's people. You're never the only one who understands God and gets God. But he says, here's why he showed up. He's representing what Jesus is to us. He's our king of righteousness. He's our king of peace. He's saying, remember, Melchizedek was not assigned under the law. Before the law, this was happening. So once the law is fulfilled, there's still a priest that is preeminent above that. And he represents our righteousness. He represents our peace. And that's who we are supposed to represent to the world. So he says in Exodus chapter 19, verse 6, before the law was ever given, God speaks to Moses. And he says, I want your followers, you shall be to me a kingdom of priests. It's literally kingly priests, but they call it a kingdom of priests because they didn't quite understand. How can you be king and priest? How can you be both? And a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel. This was his plan, not to have just one person who goes to God for you. That was never his plan. We were all supposed to go to God and not have somebody in between us and God, but all to feel like we can all go to him. Now in Peter, he translates it more closely to how it's supposed to have been translated. He says in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, 1 Peter 2:9, he says, you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, You are kingly priests, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Your job is to proclaim his praises. Now, the reason that we are kingly priests is because as kings, we also have authority to speak to the works of Satan and to cast down strongholds. And when someone needs healing, or we see someone who is being tormented or oppressed by the devil, we have kingly authority. We also have priestly privileges where we can connect to God and we can help bring people like the priests. What they did under the law was take people and help them sacrifice before God and help them repent of their sins so they can become reconnected. Because you remember the Bible says your sins have separated you from your God. We are to pronounce forgiveness to people and say, God has forgiven you of your sins. That's why the Bible makes us ambassadors. It says you are Christ ambassadors reconciling the world and telling people that there's no longer a separation between you and God. So that's our role, is to act as kings and as priests, to have authority over the works of the devil, to bring people back into communion with God. We are to be kingly priests. And so Melchizedek represents that as Jesus. That's what's his role. He came as priest and king, and that's our job also. And so that's why he shows up at this point to say, hey, Abraham, give blessings to God. God is blessing you. He pronounces his blessing to him. And he says, and give honor and praise to God for what was done. And Abraham's natural response was to give. If we do that, if we show up in situations and act as the authority of God and cast Satan out of situations and pull down those strongholds and bring people to God, their response will be they'll want to give to God. They'll want to connect. If we come and condemn, if we become ministers of condemnation instead of ministers of reconciliation, then people will retreat from God. So we're so shocked when people are pulling back from God because we're saying, you're a sinner and you're going to hell and that's wrong. And if that's all we're doing, then we're the people who were ready to cast stones at the woman caught in adultery. We're those people. She was caught in adultery, but Jesus showed up and said, "Hey, you're all sin. Look, you all, if you don't have no sin, cast the first stone." And instead of coming up there and condemning her, he says, "Is anyone else condemning you? Because I got rid of the condemners." No, no, sir. I don't condemn you either. And he pronounced forgiveness. We're to be ministers of reconciliation, ministers of grace, ministers of peace to the world. Now, if the Spirit of God comes on you and it's necessary to point out that's wrong, that's sin, that's fine. But our job is to bring reconciliation. God's not mad at the sinner. He's mad at sin. But we're supposed to go to the sinner and let them know God has forgiven you. God has a place for you. God has healing for you. God has peace. He has shalom for you. And they'll want it if we present it in that way. However, the king of Sodom showed up. So are you going to be the king of Salem or the king of Sodom? In verse 21. Now the king of Sodom said to Abraham, hey, give me the persons and take the goods for yourself. So here's give me those people. And the king of Sodom always wants those people. Let me take those people back to Sodom. And you can keep all the goods if you want. So Abraham says to him, verse 22, Abraham said to the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand to the Lord, God Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth, like he possesses all of it, that I will take nothing from a thread to a sandal strap. I don't even want a thread to a sandal strap, that I will not take anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abraham rich. So you don't get the credit, because if I take from you, if I take from Sodom, you got to remember this, if we're taking that drug money, so the drug dealer comes, hey, you want to start a church? I've got all this incredible drug money that I would just give to you, and you can start your church. I'll pay all your bills. We have to say no, thank you, even though that would sure make life easier if I just took this drug money and started my church. I'm going to go ahead and struggle with God and do it His way, even though God is slow, and He is. But thank you, Mr. Drug Man, but no. Otherwise, we said that you made me rich instead of God. Abraham knew that God would be able to bless him. So he's saying, no, I'm not going to do that. And because we said that you made me rich, O king of Sodom, except here's only part, only what the young man have eaten, I can't give that back to you, and the portion of the men who went with me. So Arnie and Eshcol and Mamre, you can give them what they want. I can't speak for them. So let them take their portion, and that's fine. And whoever wants to go back with you to Sodom, if people want to go to Sodom, you can't stop them. Because what did Lot do? He went on back to Sodom. Said, I need to go back to Sodom. That makes all the sense in the world. Let me go back. What is that about? I don't even understand that. Like, you were just kidnapped, but it was a big city, and it had all sorts of fantastic things in it, and it was attractive to him. So you can't stop people from going back to Sodom, and so the kings of Sodom will lure people back, but the king of Salem, he lures people to God. That's why the story is here. It's always about choices. Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Noah and the people out and the anti-Noahs. I mean, it's always about choices. God shows us in chapter after chapter after chapter, we have the choice. We can't blame anything on God. He always sets before us blessing and cursing, and we always have the chance to choose what we want. Sometimes the blessing takes longer because God makes sure it's rooted in the ground and it's growing on the ground and the roots are growing. We don't see the results, but it's strong, it's firm, and can't be taken away. That's like building your house on the rock instead of on the sand. So God wants to build something in us that when the winds blow and when the rain comes, it can't be shaken. So that's why it takes longer sometimes and when God's blessing us. And the riches of Sodom are easier and faster, but but Chedorlaomer, the king of cheese, he's going to show up and he's going to get you, right? And the king of Sodom can't protect you. So you can go for the quick and easy, or you go for the slow and steady. But who are we going to be? Kings of peace or kings of Sodom? That's our choice. And that's our lesson for today. We'll start with Genesis chapter 15 next week. If you're a member of Good Shepherd, please stay tuned to our pastor, Pastor Grimm, and I'll see some of you on Wednesday Bible study at 7 o'clock, because Jesus is about to talk about the end times and the book of Revelation and all that stuff coming up. And again, they have a choice to listen to Jesus or not. So please join me on Wednesday nights at 7, and thank you so much for tuning in.